right, everybody, if y'all want to come on in and get a seat, we'll go ahead and get started. Um, I appreciate y'all coming to spend the afternoon with us. It's going to be myself, Jennifer Evans, Jordan Wooder, and Charles Smith today, and we're going to talk about the PDN and get a little bit more in depth and talk a little bit about the tools that support it as well. So there'll be a QR code at the end that you can get for your PDHs. Also, we've also got this other QR code, which is an evaluation that if you fill this out, then your QR codes will actually, your PDHs will actually come to you. So, so you have to do that final step. And then that QR code will also be outside, so you can do it out there as well. But with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And, oopsie, wrong button. Yeah, we'll just go with this one. All right, so we're going to start off a little higher level and just talk about the PDN and kind of the who, what, where, when, and why of the PDN. And then we'll talk about the tools that support it. Thinking about the PDN, who really uses the PDN? And I'm really, hoping that it's really everybody. If you look at the bottom, that's the list of disciplines. And so it does cover, everybody, that works in project development. And, the PDN is really, as it says there, from project development through construction. And so, everybody's got a piece in here. The other part is the PDN is really to help identify the roles and responsibilities. With the latest update, we tried to add some context clues into that to really try to kind of say, hey, this is where this information came to help this deliverable, and this deliverable is kind of pointing to this next thing. So we've added some of that in. We've also changed from the milestones. Used to be that diamond milestone between each stage, and now we've gone to a key milestone, and those are all centered around an actual activity. And so that's kind of one of the bigger changes in that last bullet. I want y'all to begin to think about those as more of a scheduling point rather than a stopping point. Because a lot of times that diamond really felt like, hey, well, I've got to pause here. And that's not the intent of the PDN. All right. So here's the PDN. This is the latest version. And the big thing I'll point to is that first thing at the top. Click here, first time you use PDN or whatever. How many people have ever clicked on that button? A lot of you? Well, good, okay. So I know a lot of people have looked at PDN and no one's ever bothered to click on that button. And so I just want to carry you through that a little bit. So what is the PDN? And the PDN is to assist technical teammates led by PMs to realize the following. And it's really about maintaining consistency as you kind of progress through the project. It's about, streamlining our processes and our procedures. It's ensuring that we've identified the team and that we've made sure that folks are coordinating, integrating at the right points as we go through the project delivery process. It kind of lays out a systematic approach and includes our quality assurance and quality control. It also it helps to define or build your scope of services. The PDN is really a tool, but it helps you build your scope of services. And the PDN and the scope of services is then what helps you to build your schedule. And so those are kind of the two main tools that we'll focus on. So a little bit more when you push that first button, what does it say? Well, this little graphic on the right, that's just really a display of what every single discipline, activity page looks like in the PDN. You'll see at the right on the top, you've got the stages listed, and the one that you're on is highlighted in red. Then you've got your activity identifier, and you see in the PDN, you've got the 2SD2. Well, you go into the PDN, you've got 2SD2. The other very valuable little tool is that little bitty text up there that says, click here to go back to the graphic. So the PDN is an electronic document. It is not meant to be printed out and put on a shelf. It is an electronic document, and it's got a lot of links in there that will take you back and forth very easily. It's not clunky. It's nothing like the Scope of Services tool. That's horrible. It's actually really easy. So, I mean, I'll admit it. It's horrible. And so then you've got your references. So you've got all the units, processes, and procedures there. Then you've got that deliverables table that lists the task. It's got the responsibility tables over there. And then at the bottom, you get into kind of the task details that describes each thing. And did I leave anything out? I think I covered all of that. It is provided for all the disciplines. And then, you know, the other thing is the PDN is flexible and it's scalable. You can make it work for whatever project you have. It's also a living document. And so when things change, we are going to update it. And I'll talk about a comment button here in a minute. How do you use the PDN? So, you know, the PDN is, like I said, it's a good tool for helping develop their scope of services. And as I mentioned, you've got those key milestones, and those are really kind of the important activities. I say here they're break points, not stopping points. But again, the point is they're kind of key places along the way where a lot of times that's where a PM will schedule to. That's kind of like their scheduling point. You'll also notice that a lot of times we've tied those to cost estimates, because that's another key thing that we're trying to focus on, is having a good cost estimate so those key milestones are often associated with those points as well. The PDN is not a cookbook. Think about a pantry. Mike Neese gave me that scenario, and I think it's really helpful because if you think about the PDN as a pantry and you're going to work on a project, well, anything that you need to do for that project, it's referenced in the PDN. But you don't need all of that to build your project. Just like if you're cooking a meal, you got your pantry at home, you go to the cookbook, open it up, tells you what you need, you go get it out of the pantry, and then you can do your meals. It's kind of the same kind of thing. The other thing is, it's not a flow chart. Really think about this as a table of contents. You know, you go click on any one of the boxes, and it'll take you to like the chapter. It'll show you what's in that chapter. And then finally, it's not a schedule template. It does help link all the kind of activities together, and it does group them together, but just because they're listed in a certain order, that doesn't mean that that's the order it has to go in. It's just these are the kind of group of activities need to happen around this time. When to use the PDN, and it is whenever you need it. If you are new to DOT, you may want to use the PDN a lot. If you've been around a while and you kind of understand the process, you may just use it as a reference to go back and say, oh, and how are we going to do that? Have they updated that? Oh, let me go check that process and see if that's still the same. But it's really kind of a reference. So use it whenever you really need it. But if you're new, this is invaluable. I mean, I wish when I started DOT that I could have had a tool like this, that I could kind of check through and check all the boxes and really understand the whole process, because it's a lot. And then finally, it's really about helping us to get to our good scope, schedule, and budget. That's the biggest thing about the PDN. And then where do I find more information? So if you go to the Connect site and you look at projects and then project management, there's that whole section there for the project delivery network. And if you look at some of those key links down at the bottom, you'll see the link for the project delivery network. You'll see the, I think that's the red line changes. So it's really, one of the things that I think has been a really valuable tool. Every time we update the PDN or make a change, there's a red line change. So you can go back and look and see what changed. You may look at the PDN one day and think, this is not how I remembered it being. And so you can kind of check that and go back and look and see what was updated. And that's kind of carried forward since we started. You've also got the little interactive diagram. So if you want to look at your discipline and just all where you fall in the PDN, or if you're, say, working on a smaller project and you want to look through and see, okay, I want roadway and hydro and utilities, where are those boxes? You can kind of play with that and pick and choose what you want to see. The other thing is the activity champions. That's one of the newest things that we've added. When we updated the last PDN, I got a PDN champion from each of the disciplines, and so they're listed as a contact. And in some of the units like environmental analysis or traffic, where you've got, a lot of little subsets under there, well, there's multiple champions listed. And so use that as a reference if you need it, because those folks are really the ones that are helping to keep this thing updated. So they should know the most current information. And then finally, that comment button there. I want your comments. I want your feedback. If you're looking at the PDN, if you find a broken link, if you read something that this doesn't sound exactly right, go ahead and put a comment in. If you've got just a comment about, the way that it's set up and you think it should be different, you can make a comment. And so when we get those comments, if it's something small, like the link was broken, we'll go ahead and update that. We'll fix that. Okay, I'm checking my time. I want to make sure I'm not running too long. And then if it's a bigger change, we'll update those like every 6 months. All right. So why use the PDN? Essentially, we've got all of our tools kind of aligned with it now. We've got a common language now. We've set up all of these things where when we talk about a project manager, we're talking about the PM that's going to lead that project, whether it's division or central, and that's the language throughout the PDN. And so because all of us in our disciplines have the ways that we talk to each other, and sometimes if you're in geotech, something's different from when you're in roadway, just the way that you kind of talk about things. So we try to use common language throughout, and again, let's list all the procedures and policies and guidance. All right, so next I want to dig in a little bit into stage 1 and get a little bit deeper into that, because stage 1 was updated when we just did the most recent PDN, and it's a whole lot better. But 2, most of y'all in this room, unless you work with this feasibility studies unit, you probably haven't paid attention to stage 1, because it's just not the section that you normally use. You start with stage 2 and move forward. So I wanted to kind of dig into a little bit of it and just give you some high-level details. First of all, this is stage 1, and these are the main objectives and deliverables that are a part of stage 1. And I'm going to walk through each of these. The first one is the project sheets, and that comes from that first box up there, which is the information that comes from TPD. It's stage 0. And so that's really kind of the first thing, when we've got a project, one of the first things we've got is the project sheets, and it lists all that information. It talks about the need. It talks about, the recommendation that you have made for the project. It lists all the different, facility map, you've got traffic capacity stuff, you've got a typical section. You've got all that key information that's the kind of that piece of, it's really like a piece of paper that is handed off at that stage. Next, we've got the Express Design Traffic Evaluation. This is a tool we created probably about 3 years ago now, and this is a great tool. It's a high-level kind of, I'll say it's quick and dirty, but it's a good tool to evaluate a project early. It takes into account the volumes and then a little bit of analysis, and it helps us to really get a good cost estimate. And, that's one of the big things that we want is a good cost estimate when we start a project, and this is part of the Express Design kind of process. The next thing is the cost estimates, and I mentioned that earlier. In all the cost estimates, you got right-of-way utilities and construction. Every time you see a cost estimate, you're going to see these 3 linked together. That means all these need to get updated at the same time. Also, there's a little gray box around those, so it's kind of identified as, hey, cost estimate time. And these, should be updated every 2 years, no matter what. But there are certain places where we're going to ask to be updated. The other point I make about this is, especially at this stage, it's really key to helping us set that project budget. As the project's going to get programmed to the STIP, this is the number that they're going to use. So it's a really important estimate. All right, so this is some of the other kind of information that leads down into the first half of the stage one, which is the express design. And you see you've got some of the key kind of identifiers there with structures and complete streets. You know, complete streets has become a really big thing. We need to identify it up front and early so that we're considering those costs. I'm sure many of you over the last couple of years have had projects where complete streets came about, and all of a sudden your costs went up. Well, if we're using the updated guidance, this should be getting done early. And so all of that information leads down into the complete street design. And then you'll see over on the left in the complete street, or excuse me, God, I can't talk. The express design, there's a project initiation form, and those are some of the items that are listed in there. And again, it's kind of that key information it picks up from the project sheets and just begins to carry that stuff forward. So you're going to update your project need. You know, you're going to update any kind of typical section or changes that were made, and that'll get picked up here. So next, you're going to go into, well, I was going to give you some examples, actually. So this is an example of the project initiation form, and you'll see it just shows kind of high-level, you know, vicinity map, some due dates, some key information about the project. And then it kind of breaks down, okay, the project description, your cost, the recommendations and findings, and then that's pretty much it for the express design. Now we're going to move down to the latter half of the stage one there. And in this section, you know, I'm not going to talk about all the boxes down there, but some of the ones that I'll highlight is, for example, that traffic safety operations. This is one of those kind of things that they do early at this stage to decide if this is a significant project, because if it is, that group needs to get involved a little bit earlier. Value management starts looking at risk management. Have we evaluated this project and considered enough risk that it's going to help us to get that good cost estimate? We're talking about the NEPA-SEPA document. Did we identify what that is? Have we looked high level at environmental information? Also, you've got the environmental needs one there. And if you look over into the deliverables as a part of the project scoping report, which is all what this leads to, again, you're going to see we're just going to pick up with that project initiation form and kind of carry it forward. One of those first deliverables is that preliminary environmental considerations checklist, and that's really an atlas screening, and it gives you high level, you know, what are the wetlands, streams, you know, impacts, historic impacts. All those things are looked at from a GIS standpoint. And so we're trying to help really, you know, again, nail down the scope, nail down what needs to be included, and get that good cost estimate. Little examples of here. That's just an example of a project scoping report. You'll see there's different kinds of project scoping reports. The one at the top, the streamlined PSR, it's really the express design. There may have been one or two steps added to it, but it's essentially the express design. The enhanced PSR is for a project that is probably a little bit bigger. It's probably going to have some alternatives. It probably needs some public involvement, and it probably needs some merger screening. That's the kind of project that could come out of feasibility studies with concurrence point one already achieved. And then you've got just your standard PSR, and I'll show you a little bit on that one. So this is, you know, part of, again, the scoping report. Again, it just picks up, and you'll see it's asking the questions like, you know, what type of document are you doing? What kind of funding is it? What kind of PSR was done? What type of contract are we going to build it with, design build or bid build? All those kind of key decisions are supposed to be made up front. Now, all of this is part of the project scoping report guidance that was developed in the last year. None of you have probably seen a project scoping report that has all this, because I dare say there's maybe only a handful been done, and maybe not even that many. I won't even ask Matt back there in the back, but anyway, and then you've got information about the project history. You've got the purpose and need. Although if you were in Matt and John Jameson's presentation earlier, they were preaching need and purpose, because need is important. That's what's first. So And then you've got your alternatives considered in any sort of agency involvement. So what happens, if you've missed the connections along the way? What if you didn't really follow something? What could go wrong? Well, your project information wasn't carried forward. Well, you remember those project sheets that we talked about? It's a good example of, if you didn't pick that up, it's a good chance that maybe you missed something along the way. The next one is, did we have traffic input considered? If you didn't get your EDTE done right, or not at all, that's another example. And, you think about a project at this stage, one of the probably key driving factors for getting a good cost estimate is, do we know we're building the right thing? Because a lot of times with a traffic evaluation, you're going to figure out whether you're under or over designing that project. So this, I'll say, to me, is one of the most valuable tools that we've created for this in a long time. The other one is, like I've mentioned, did we consider the cost correctly? Remember, we got our cost estimates. Did we consider the stakeholder input? And you remember I talked about those kind of key things that we were asking. Were they getting included in the express design? Did we ask the right questions to the right people? And then, of course, was that design proposed? Was it the right design? Was it good? Roadway Design actually reviews the express design, and so that's something that needs to happen, because if your design's not right, again, you're going to be leading down the wrong path. The other one is was the proposed solution, was it correct? And did we consider the right things? Again, you remember this slide where we talked about, look at the environmental stuff. Did we consider the right things, the environmental effects? Then you've got, again, did we document things for the future to get carried forward? One of the things coming out of the project scoping report is that project's initiation form. That's a complete form now. And then there's even some guidance in the back of this that talks about the project initiation packet, which is kind of the group of things, all the things that have been considered up to this point. And that's what's kind of carried forward. And then we get to the risk part about it. Did we consider, the risk? Did we make sure we did? So with any of those, if we didn't consider the right things, then it's a good chance that we haven't got a project that was scoped well or costed out well. So our TIP is going to be set up wrong from the get-go. All right, the other thing that we've added to this stage and throughout the PDN are the project manager activities. And so the one here is to lead the team through project initiation handoff. And so really this is kind of that point where, a lot of times in the past, a project manager would pick up a project and they would do a project scope meeting. That's when they got started. The intent here now is that the project managers kind of getting pulled back into stage one, and as a part of finishing that project scoping report and getting that project initiation packet, all that's getting carried forward and moved ahead. So again, it's about moving all that key information ahead. All right, so that's stage one, and I'm now going to turn it over to Jennifer, and she's going to talk a little bit about stage two.
All right, so I am not going to teach us how to do an environmental planning document or how we do right-of-way plans or any of that, but I am going to talk about how we work together as a team to deliver PDN Stage 2. So those of you that are subject matter experts, take your hat off and think about how we work together. And that would not be it, because that's going backward. Okay. So when I think about the PDN, and specifically in Stage 2, I see it as a path to fully developing your project. And so we work together to learn the why the action is needed and the performance that's desired. And then we work together to identify the possible ways to get that desired performance. Then we have to assess the effects that these ways may have on the community and the resources. And we have to identify the one way that satisfies those legal requirements, provides the performance that we're looking for, avoids or minimizes harm to the best extent possible, and can be delivered within schedule and budget. So that's a lot if you think about it. So here's just an overall list of the PDN Stage 2 activities in a nutshell. And I'm going to make you guys do a little bit of audience participation because it's late in the day and get us a little alive, but mostly just because I want us to think about this. And so if I call as I call these bullets out, if you would just please raise your hand if you're in your role, you directly or indirectly influence or have a part in thinking about natural and human studies, directly or indirectly, okay? Engaging the public. It's like most of us, right? Identifying risks. All y'all. Developing and evaluating alternatives. You get the point of this. Cost estimates. It's a roadway, like roadway does the quantities, but it's all of us, right? Advancing environmental documentation and avoiding and minimizing. Doing the design recommendation plan set. Thinking about right-of-way utility and permitting strategy, having a field inspection, and completing right-of-way plans. And so I guess I'm just a big proponent of teams, and I say it again, not one of us knows everything, and that's why we have teams, and that's why we have to work together. And part of that is understanding our boxes, but also thinking about what's in the boxes that are around us that we may need to understand, but we may not be directly involved in. And so when we talk about PDN Stage 2, we also have to think of people other than us. And so we have stakeholders. We have lots of stakeholder coordination that happens in Stage 2. This is just a list, and everybody can look at this, and they can find one or another of their favorite stakeholders, I feel sure. And sometimes they can be challenging, and they can make our schedules and our projects difficult. But that's part of our responsibility in developing good projects. So we're going to just dig a little bit deeper in this presentation in the next few slides into the early PDN Stage 2. And so thinking about things that are happening in early Stage 2 and why it's important for us to work as teams. And so Derek touched on this a little bit, but I just want to emphasize again this highlighted of these estimates, and it's utility estimate, right-of-way estimate, and construction estimate. That's the project's estimate. It's not one we don't want to save on retaining walls and escalate the right-of-way estimate. Like, we have to be thinking about the impacts of our design decisions across all the estimates and all the disciplines. And so they go together. And so I like how they've been lumped together in this version of the PDN, where versus before they were just kind of boxes across the stage. It's always good to think about why things are important, why we do things that we do. And so, I'm sorry, did I skip something here? Why is it important? I feel like I skipped a slide. Oh, you deleted it. I'm like, that would explain it. It's all good. Okay, we can roll. So another thing I was going to focus on is advancing NEPA-SEPA documentation. And so when the PDN was updated recently, I think the word said prepared and we changed it to advance. And I know that doesn't really make that much of a difference, but it kind of goes to what Derek was saying about people seeing things as a hard stop versus a break and a consideration. And so the documentation is shown in the middle of PDN Stage 2, but that's not a hard stop. And so we wanted to make sure people understand that, because you can be advancing NEPA-SEPA documentation throughout. And so anyway, with that in mind, why is NEPA-SEPA documentation even important? And so first of all, because it's a law, and that's a good reason to make something important, right? It's also a major milestone. And so for those non-DOT folks, you might say, well, what does that mean? Major milestones are things in DOT that we are measured on to deliver. And so when Matt talked about this morning, project delivery and expectations for project delivery, and he talked specifically about the 12-month let list, but in Stage 2, the document is a deliverable that we're measured upon. And so every year at the beginning of the state fiscal year, we get a snapshot. We have major milestones that lay out the things that we say we're going to do in that fiscal year. And so if in a division, in Jeanette's division, they say they've got 20 environmental documents that they're going to do in fiscal year 26, it takes a snapshot in our system. And then their success rate for environmental documentation delivery is based upon if they deliver what they've said they are going to do. So having an awareness up front, and especially this time of year, about we're setting those milestones and we're going to be measured is super important for everyone to understand as we work together to meet success. It's also important that we work as a team during environmental documentation and decision-making with a project manager so that they can really ensure that we're doing that coordination, because again, we raised our hands and we're all working together, but somebody's got to be looking out for that overall coordination, making sure we're making informed decisions and we're providing an interdisciplinary approach. So what happens when we miss the connection? And there's a whole laundry list of things here. This is not conclusive. There's many more I could think of, but poor project communication leads to lack of project buy-in. And, you know, nobody wants to go to the public meeting to introduce a great project that hasn't been communicated properly to the public, and they don't even want. And so thinking about our project communication, weak purpose and need, or weak need and purpose, as you said, may lead to scope creep or project indecision. And so I heard Matt talk about this morning how we can look at scopes. And so we need to establish a scope early on. We need to use the tools that we have in place to establish a scope, and then we need to try to stick to that. And when we start to scope creep, we need to think about purpose and need, and are the decisions that we're making being guided by that purpose and need. Poor documentation of environmental decisions may lead to challenges with permitting. That's a very narrow statement. Poor documentation of any decision might lead to challenges with a lot of things. And so just think about how we document things as we're deciding them. Project plans may include designs that cannot be constructed. Nobody wants to go to field inspection to be told, yeah, that's a great design, but we can't build it. Estimates may escalate. I think we all understand the importance of cost right now and cost containment. And so really trying to think about making sure that we've got early estimates that include everything we anticipate. Schedules may delay, team frustrations may develop, and rework might be required. And show of hands, who likes to do rework? Yeah. So right here is just a screenshot of the pre-construction SharePoint site. I'm sure most project people are familiar. Just thinking about working together to document and manage decisions. I already said it, but I'm going to say it again, because really that SharePoint site is where we're building our administrative record. You know, back in the day, we had paper files and we had brown folders and manila folders, and I don't know what all folders we had, but everything was printed and documented, and really SharePoint has replaced that. And so being very mindful of how we're storing documents on SharePoint, how we're storing documents anywhere, and how we're building that administrative record. And then thinking about project commitments, how we identify, track, and implement project commitments. So I'm just going to skip right here now to this project commitment tool. Hopefully you guys are somewhat familiar or have seen this, but this is a tool that's in SharePoint that can be used to capture project commitments, to track project commitments. It doesn't have to be a true, and Derek help me out here, environmental commitment. It can be a project commitment as in we have a school and we need to have the road closed only during summer, and so we are planning for April letting so that when we get delayed or we have something come up and we say, oh, we need 6 more months, and everybody forgets that we've made a commitment that we have an April letting, this is the place to capture those types of decisions. So one last slide here, and this is just permits and certifications that can significantly impact schedule. I'm not going to read through all this, and I only show this to just say, think about these types of things, because this is the type of stuff that if we don't identify and manage up front in our schedules, we could set ourselves up for failure. And there's a few of these that, you know, I won't pick on anything like FERC, but could be very detrimental to our project schedules. So just having an awareness, everybody having awareness of permitting and what it does to our schedules is important. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jordan, and he's going to focus on design recommendation plan sets.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. For those of you who haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Jordan Woodard. I'm one of the group leads in the roadway design unit. serving divisions 1 through 6 and 8 with designs and design-related questions. So today we're going to talk a little bit about one of our key deliverables, the design recommendation plan set, or as some people are starting to call the DERPS. I don't know how I feel about that particular nickname. There were some alternatives presented last week. Someone said maybe the drops, or my personal favorite, the DRIPS, which is now going to be my DJ name if I ever decide to change careers. But we're just going to talk a little bit about what you would find in that deliverable if you were to open up a set of DRPS plans. So we're going to dive in together to this sometimes mysterious, often misunderstood key roadway deliverable. Oh, I did the same thing. Went the wrong way. So, what is the DRPS? It's our first roadway design final deliverable, meaning that it is completed and tied to final surveys, and that it's information that will be carried through to the end of the design stage. This plan sets our first real look at establishing some essential roadway design alignments. Typical sections are being established and they're being defined. Horizontal and vertical alignments are being set and correlated to the existing topography. 3D models and cross sections are being generated using that typical section, turning it into a template and then applying it to that horizontal and vertical alignment. And limits of construction and preliminary right-of-way are being laid out based on the 3D model information. Now, sometimes folks will call the DRPS the 25% plans. And based on some older nomenclature that was used for a previous submittal, pre-PDN. And while the 25% plan submittal, it would probably be the closest to the current DRPS submittal, they're not the same. By design, the DRPS is meant to be more. It's meant to have more coordination. It's meant to have more information built into it as a submittal. So wherever you hear someone equating the two, realize that they are in fact intended to be different submittals. So if you were to open up a set of design recommendation plans, what would you find? Well, typically those plans are submitted in 4 PDFs. And in the first PDF, it's usually entitled TTD for titles, typicals, and details. You're going to see a title sheet. And on this title sheet, you're going to see a vicinity map with project location, and you'll see the location of any off-site detours that are expected for the project. You're going to get a general overview of the plan sheet layout. Now, the example that I've pulled here was a one plan sheet project, but if you have a project with multiple plan sheets, the title sheet is a great place to go to figure out what plan sheet you're looking for. If you're looking for a particular crossroads or some type of a major environmental feature, that's a great place to go and look for that. You're going to get the design data that the project was designed to and the traffic data and forecast that the project was designed to, as well as the project length, the project right-of-way and let dates that were current to the STIP at the time of the development of the plans, and your project numbers, those WBS and FA numbers. You're also going to see in that TTD set the typical sections that are going to give you lane widths, shoulder widths, ditch types and slopes, cut and fill slopes, and preliminary or final pavement design. You're going to see details for wedging of pavement if we're expecting to do that on this project, and locations of widening versus full depth pavement, along with any side paths or sidewalks that are anticipated on the project. If you open up the plan or the profile PDFs, you're going to see alignments. You'll see the horizontal alignment and its associated curve data on the plan PDF. You're going to see the vertical alignments with their associated curve data in the profile PDF. Now, if you're looking for detours, if your project has on-site detour alignments, they're typically going to be found in actually the TTD set as part of the 2B series of details. Is typically where you would find those. And then if you're looking for cross sections, you're going to find those in that cross section or XSC PDF. If you opened up one of the plans and you're looking at a plan sheet, a few things that you're going to find along with that horizontal alignment data are our preliminary limits of construction or slope stakes along with a C or an F denoting whether that's a cut or a fill section there. You're going to see guardrail design for any known obstructions in the clear zone recovery area that the engineer feels need to be shielded. You're going to see some preliminary right-of-way and construction easements based on the construction limits that were done with our model. And these will very likely be modified later. We understand as design progresses, there likely will be additional right-of-way and easement needs for drainage, for utilities, for other things, but this is an initial look. This is an early look at our right-of-way and our easement to try to establish what we think might be those needs for this project. And you're also going to see driveways at the DRPS stage that will help verify that needed connections for property owners are made, and that any needed driveway alignments are accounted for and designed. And that information will feed in well to hydraulics and the next step to help them in determining any pipes that need to be placed for driveways. Along with the plan sheets, you're going to see two additional documents that come with the DRPS. The first being the maintenance of traffic narrative, and this is a thought-through overview worked out with the roadway engineer and the work zone traffic control engineer to put together what will likely be the traffic management for this project. At this stage, there are no TMP plans, but this should be a thought-out process on how the project could be built. You're also going to see the design exception checklist, and this is a look by the roadway designer at the major alignments in the project and evaluating whether any of these need a design exception for one of the controlling criteria set forth by FHWA. If a design exception is required based on the checklist, then the roadway designer is going to go ahead and start working on that design exception request packet, and that will come after the DRPS is submitted. So while the design recommendation plan set lives in the roadway design portion of the PDN and it's a major roadway design submittal, it's not just roadway that feeds into that set of plans. We work with early information from hydro, from utility, from geotech, from structures, and as I mentioned, with work zone traffic control and our division partners, and many, many more stakeholders when we are setting up our alignments and taking a first look at project impacts. It's important that we have this early coordination to get the buy-in from others and have our best shot at getting these alignments right the first time. Why do we need to worry so much about getting it right? Why is the DRPS important in the process of plan delivery? The design recommendation plan set has been referred to as kind of the backbone of the design plan set, meaning that the DRPS sets up the basic information, so there's typicals and the horizontal and vertical alignments that other disciplines will be building their designs off of. Errors in alignments or alignments being in the wrong place can cause major headaches for designs down the road. To help with some of the quality for our DRPS plans, the roadway design units developed a set of QC and QA checklists, and they currently are kind of a long one. We're clocking in at 8 pages with our QC checklist right now. But the intent is that the designer is not just using this checklist as a final stage to just mark off that they've done it, that they're working through this checklist as they're developing their plans. Because that checklist has coordination touch points. The checklist has things you should be watching for as you are designing. So the hope is folks are working through this as they're creating the DRPS, and they're using it as a tool to help with the quality of those plans. What happens if we get it wrong? Well, like if we were to have a misalignment or an injury to our backbone, it could cause a whole series of problems. Errors at the DRPS stage can become plan errors that may continue on in the plan development process. Sometimes our QA and QC checklists are often cumulative in that they build upon each other. So something that is missed in an earlier stage may not be checked in the same way later on in the process. And if those stages make it to construction, they can become costly construction revisions. And even when errors are caught later on in the plan development process, it often results in some kind of rework because other designs are built on the DRPS information. If we have to go back and change that information, we're issuing a design revision, and others will have to go look at their designs and determine whether they need to produce any rework or change their plans. And those redesigns can often have impacts on your project schedules and your pre-construction budgets. So how can we all help to make the design recommendation plan set the best, most accurate, and complete deliverable that it can be? The simple matter is we want you. We want all of you. Whether you wear a roadway design hat Whether you are even in the necessarily design field at all, if you are asked to engage and plug in and review a set of design recommendation plans, we ask that you would do that. And a great tool to do that is the Design Recommendation Plan Set Review Meeting. Back when we were still developing 25% plans, there was very commonly a 25% plan review meeting where everyone reviewed the plans, we all sat down in a room, and we went through those plans sheet by sheet and talked through the issues that we saw. And that type of a meeting has always been part of the write-up of the DRPS, but it has really kind of fallen out of practice. And so a great way to get engagement from folks is to start having this meeting. Start sending out your design recommendation plan set to others to review, to comment on, to come together to meet and really hash out those things. Because if we're waiting until we get all the way to field inspection, we're already at a point where redesign is going to have to happen. So the time to engage is then. The time to engage is at that review meeting. And we ask that you would do that. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Charles, I believe, here, and he'll talk a little bit about some tools.
All right, I'm Charles Smith from Hydraulics Unit. I'm going to talk a bit about scope, schedule, and budget as it applies to the PDN. All right, first step is scope of services generator. That is a utility on the PMU website from which you can create a Word document by deselecting or selecting a number of items. And Derek alluded to how terrible it was a little while ago. Also available on the PMU website is a Word document that is the cumulative collection of all the scope items under the PDN that are available on a project. So you can use either or. All right, scope of services, why is it important? It clearly defines the work, the activities, tasks, and deliverables, and that the firm and DOT will both perform on a project. Assumptions and limitations, very important because assumptions and limitations make sure that the correct deliverables get done to the correct degree, and it avoids scope creep as well. And the scope of services provides the basis for project team accountability. If it's listed on the scope, then the project team is, of course, accountable for it. And from the scope of services grows the workday estimate. We'll cover that in a minute in more detail. Okay, this is the scope of services generator product, which is the Word file, which you can shortcut to and just obtain the Word document itself without going through the scope of services generator. This is just a comprehensive listing of all the deliverables and activities on the project, and we go from there to the project schedule, the MS project schedule. On your right, you have what is known as a Gantt chart. In the PDN world, the Gantt chart is the only flow chart you get. So if you're looking for a flow chart in the PDN, you have to scratch that itch with your ultimate Gantt chart, flow chart that's produced at the end of schedule production. Why do we need to update the MS project schedule? So without a schedule, projects tend to go on in perpetuity. A schedule allows for allocating resources. If you have 5 projects going on and you're a hydraulics person, then you need to know where in calendar time those different projects are going to fall so you can obtain more resources, you can sub part of it out, so on and so forth. And we need to be sure when our due dates are. That's called schedule milestone awareness. Identify potential risks, say along the critical path, which is the longest path through the project. If you add time to a critical path item, critical path task, it extends your overall project schedule. And identify delivery strategies, so ways to optimize the schedule so that you can meet the deadlines that are contained within. All right, some recent changes to the MS project schedule template. The MS project schedule template is available also on the PMU website. There are a number of templates available. There's one for a bridge project. If there's not now, there will soon be one available for a merger project, and there's one also available for a standard non-merger project. These things have been added. Responsible party, so that is going to be divided up between DOT and PEF tasks. Predecessors and successors, we're going to get more into what those are defined as in a minute. Predecessors and successors are essential to formulating that Gantt chart that you saw a couple of slides ago. Start and finish dates and durations, also essential for a project schedule. And the schedule indicates the key project deliverables and activities. So those are the things that Jennifer alluded to a little while ago that are SAP milestones that are measured. All right, workday estimate form, formerly known as the kitchen sink, but we don't call it that any longer. Okay, generally speaking, the workday estimate form is going to match your scope of services Word document. Not always. Sometimes the workday estimate can be a little more detailed. It can include certain items that aren't necessarily detailed in the scope of services document, and that's fine. Do the line items in the workday estimate match the scope? Well, we just covered that. Yes, generally speaking, but not always. And is the project information correctly entered? I would hope so. Those are things like staff initials at the top, firms preparing the estimate, and units matter, for example. Some units, such as hydraulics and roadway, use different units, such as hours and days, on different tabs of the workday estimate. So you need to be cognizant of the time units that they're expressed in for each service unit. Lots of units there. Direct expenses, those are simply hotels and mileage and things that are direct pass-through costs to PEF, for example. And that's what I just talked about, work days versus work hours. I jumped the gun on the slide a little bit, my fault. QA/QC is time that is included on the workday estimate. QA and QC is a designer generally checking themselves or someone slightly higher level checking a designer's work. QC is more of global oversight by the firm, so that time should also be included. Okay, so that was the theory part of the program. This is a little bit drilled down further into a practical application where I continue to talk about scope, schedule, and budget. They're conveniently color-coded, as you can see on this slide. The scenario is this. PM solicits scope, budget, and schedule from hydraulics, which is me, for a grade separation bridge replacement project to get right-of-way plans completed, to get 2 right-of-way plans completed. If you don't know, grade separation bridge replacement just simply means that it's a bridge over a roadway. It's not a bridge over a river. There's no river or major hydraulic structures involved in this particular scenario. That becomes important in a little while. So the first thing I would do, if I hadn't done 600 of these, would be to sit down and evaluate what boxes of mine of hydraulics are relevant in the PDN stage 2 in order to get down to this block, which is 2RD4. So I have 2HY1, I have 2HY2, so I need to pay special attention to those in the steps going forward. Okay, so these are the deliverable charts or the deliverable tables within the PDN document. At the top we have 2HY1, at the bottom we have 2HY2. These are all the deliverables, all the possible deliverables, not necessarily the deliverables for this project, but all possible deliverables available under my segments of the PDN. You'll note that I've crossed out the hydraulic control letter. That's a little bit rare. We don't typically do those except under special circumstances, so I cross that out pretty often. I believe that says hydroplaning right there. Normally I'm standing much closer to the slide, so I can read things off the slide a lot better. So if I get something wrong, that's why. Hydroplaning, our design speed is, let's say 40 miles an hour, so we don't typically evaluate hydroplaning on a 40 mile per hour design speed project. These down here are, what does that say? Somebody over there. Okay, hydraulic survey report. Because this is a bridge over a roadway and not over a river, we do not have to do a BSR or a CSR, which stands for Bridge Survey Report or Culvert Survey Report. We will, however, under 2HY2, be performing our typical roadway storm sewer design, which is just inlets, ditches, pipes, that sort of thing. But no major hydraulic structures on this project. And that, I think, says something about merger. This is not a merger project, so that I'm mentally checking off or mentally Xing off the deliverables list. This is the exercise you should go through as a subject matter expert that is that has been asked to develop a scope under the PDN by a project manager. Okay, scoping. This is the next step in the process, the scoping Word document, which just grows out of the deliverables list, the deliverables table from the PDN. This is actually a screenshot of the Word document that you would be sent by a PM, typically from a PEF, and it contains all the possible deliverables. Again, it goes into a little more detail than the PDN deliverables list. So what is that top X? What's that one? Okay, so we don't have any of those. And preliminary hydroplaning assessment, our design speed's too low for hydroplaning, so we're not going to do that. So and this one is, hydroplaning assessment, further down under 2HY1, and that is merger, I believe. Okay, so instead of mentally checking these off the list like I did in the previous slide, I'm actually going to check these off the list or cross these out with a strike-through font. You can work out whatever formatting of the text you want to work out with your respective PM. I like to physically cross them off with a strike-through font so it's clear that they weren't forgotten, but they were deliberately checked off or deliberately struck out. Okay, this is 2HY2, which is our final design. I'm going to go back up to 2HY1. 2HY1, just so you know, for a little context, that's our preliminary hydraulic assessment of the entire project. That's before we ever really put pen to paper and start designing pipes and bridges and that sort of thing. 2HY2 is our more hardcore design. That's storm sewer, ditches, bridges if we had one. Final hydroplaning is in 2HY1. So again, I believe that is a bridge survey report that we're not going to do. Manually strike through with a particular font characteristic there. And what does that one say? Merger? Yeah, not a merger project. That, again, I think is merger. And that is, what does that say? Hydraulic survey reports. So we're not doing those because, again, this is a grade separation bridge. So your task as a project team member, and while developing the scope, is to edit this Word document as needed and return it to the PM. From this grows the budget or the workday estimate, formerly known as the kitchen sink. So after you establish your scope with the PM, they will then solicit from you a budget or a workday estimate. At the top section, I have 2HY1, bottom is 2HY2. There's a theme here. You know, we see this again and again. These line items may, as I mentioned, be more detailed than what you've seen in the scoping document because they have things maybe like field work or hotels as far as direct costs and those sort of things. So we calculate in hours over here. If you're in hydraulics on the left-hand side, it rolls up into work days over here. So under work days for 2HY1, we have 8 work days, and we have about 22 and a half work days for 2HY2. So you will return, after developing this, you will return this to the PM. In the case of an in-house project, or in the case if you are a GEC, you will be doing a comparative estimate that the PM will then compare to a PEF estimate, and then you have to go into negotiation if they're not within certain dollar and day thresholds. All right, so I need to draw a distinction here between calendar time, which is in this green box, which I think says about 110 days, and our workday estimate, workdays, which is 22 and a half days. Well, why are they so different? Because schedule duration in the green box is almost never going to be the same as workday estimate duration because you have things like holidays and you have things like Thanksgiving. Well, Thanksgiving is a holiday. You have things like multiple projects going on at the same time. So you have to stop your design, hand it to a supervisor to check, and then it sits on their desk for a week while they get ready to check it, and then you pick up the design again. In the meantime, you've been working on another of your 5 projects. So your schedule duration is going to usually be much, much longer in calendar time than your total work days. Your fee is based on the work days, and your schedule is based on the schedule duration. Your schedule duration is bound by your start and stop date, calendar time, right here. That's what governs your duration. Actually, the start date is set, I believe, if I'm thinking about this correctly. The start date is set, you enter duration, and then that sets your end date of your task. So each task, I skipped this part, Each task is a line item in the schedule. That's a discrete task. Several subtasks roll up into a global task. Those global tasks are many times related to the SAP milestones that we are measured on. Okay, so we just talked about this section up here. We have our 2HY1 duration of 8 workdays plus time for staff availability, which goes into our 110-day calendar duration. And then what do we need to know from here? Well, we need to know the definition of predecessor and also, less importantly, successor. And I'll get that on the next slide. Okay, so what is a predecessor? A predecessor is very simple. It's just the thing, a task, or multiple tasks, which must be finished before you can start your task. So in this case, we have 2HY. All right, I'm going to have to walk over here. Or I can just put my glasses on. I'll opt for the glasses. Okay. Down here we have predecessor 129 for 2HY1. And you'll notice if we follow the arrow up, line item 129 is right here, which is notice to proceed. So for my 2HY1 task, notice to proceed and sometimes 2RD1 are predecessors. That just means they have to be finished before I can start my 2HY1. 2RD1 is, I say sometimes, a predecessor because that only is a predecessor in the case where we have multiple alignments that roadway is proposing, and we will have to evaluate hydraulically for cost purposes for doing an estimate which of those alignments, or we'll have to evaluate all the hydraulic structures on those various alignments. 2HY2 predecessor, and that is number 151, which is the design recommendation plan set. So in my predecessors column, I have line item 151 listed as a predecessor, follow the green arrow, and item 151 is design recommendation plan set. So DRPS, which I will never call DERPS, Jordan. Never in my life will I call it DERPS. And yeah, DRIPS. You heard it here. That's Jordan's preferred nomenclature. Anyway, so I need DRIPS to happen before I can do 2HY2, which is hydraulic design. In some cases, you have to take note and plan for circular dependencies. So item 1 here is submit design recommendation plan set. So this is roadway's first crack at design recommendation plan set. Up here is a 2HY1 task, which technically should be done before DRPS plan. However, one of my subtasks in 2HY1 is to comment on the DRPS plan or DRIPS plan. So once that's done, then roadway in item 3 right here can continue with the DRPS plan set modifications. So they back reference 2HY1. They have a predecessor that's in 2HY1. So that is an example of a circular dependency of subtasks. You just have to be cognizant of that because not every set of tasks throughout the PDN follows in a linear fashion. We zigzag back and forth, up and down. Okay, so bottom line, project team member, their role is to help the PM edit the schedules, tasks, predecessors, and durations. Successors, which I didn't define for you, but a successor is simply a task that becomes enabled when you finish your own task. It's for us as project team members to edit the tasks, predecessors, and durations, and by doing so for our own tasks, we set the other units up who are doing the exact same thing that we are to help formulate a holistic schedule for the entire project. And if everybody does their part and the PM guides it, then you end up with a very comprehensive project schedule, which is actually very useful. You'll notice here that an example of editing the tasks is that I've X'd out BSR. I committed that to memory. You didn't have to read that for me. I X'd out the BSR in each of these, the bridge survey report in each of these tasks, because this, again, is a grade separation bridge replacement, and we do not have any major hydraulic structures. So that's just a very simple example of editing the task names. That's it.
This is just left over from an exercise that we're doing with our training at work these days. And so this was a PDN goal that we created. So it's a really great goal, I think. And so if we could all do this and follow the PDN, we could deliver projects really well. So with that, we are done. And we'll take any questions if anybody's got any. Yes, sir, Bill. So there is a new MS project schedule template, and it has been updated, and it now includes the predecessors and the successors. It includes the DOT and PEF roles. It includes durations. All this is just kind of built together. So when you develop your scope, you need to go into it and kind of reconnect everything to match what your scope is. But the idea was to kind of put everything in it instead of giving you kind of the basics. We wanted to add it all in there so you could kind of just rebuild it. And the reason that we've added the DOT task and the PEF task is because what we've come to see is that, oftentimes a consultant gives us their schedule and it includes all of their stuff, but there's also stuff that DOT is doing. And if you're not really considering everything for the project, then in a lot of ways it puts the consultant at a disadvantage because we're asking you to deliver the project on time, but yet you don't know what's happening at DOT. So we've tried to fix that. The other thing I will say is, one of the number one questions that I'm asking project managers is, do you have a project schedule? And they always say yes. But now Katrina is taking over PMU, and so her follow-up questions are, how old is your schedule, and how far does it go? Because every project should have a schedule that's been updated and goes all the way to construction. And if you're a consultant and you're creating a schedule, then your schedule should look the whole thing through. I've also been telling staff, if you go to a meeting at DOT, someone should be talking about the project schedule in that meeting. I don't care if they're talking about the next 6 months or whatever, but we've got to start talking about project schedules, and so making sure that we're identifying it and calling it out in a meeting. So that's my soapbox today. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Just so we're all clear, the durations that are in the template are just...
They're fake. Yes.
I just had to say it.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Reka?
Have you guys, I know you changed the PDN document and the school document, but have you changed what the...
So the workday estimate is getting finished up, and it should get posted by the end of this month.
Now, can I ask you, can you make all the worksheets look same
The
with the man days versus man hours instead of the same thing? And also from the left side of the total versus the right side of the total?
baby steps.
And also those direct expense, everything looks so differently in each one of them.
Yeah.
I know in the past, when you're using the same from the past, when every individual project was done by individual units, but I think that's something that
Yeah. No, we've talked, because the direct expense still shows things like sepia and stuff that nobody uses. So we've talked about getting those updated. As far as man days versus man hours, like every unit kind of has their own thing they're following. And so I know it's confusing. Again, I mean, my ultimate goal is we're going to get rid of the workday estimate form we've got and do something even better. So I'm hoping it goes away soon. But, soon could be 2 years. All right. Anybody else? Oh, you got another one? You good? Yes, sir.
Does the PDN stage 1 match the express design guidelines?
Yes. So in the update, that was one of the things we did with the update was to make sure that all the express design, project scoping guidance, and stage 1 align and match, because before they didn't. So
Feasibility study guidelines
No. You still need to use, no, yeah. The PDN, it follows the flow, but use the express, like, again, the PDN is that kind of reference tool, but within the PDN, there's a reference to the express design and project scoping guidance. So that's what you should be using. Yeah, good question. Yes, sir.
Is there a distribution list for PMU where as the updates happen, we can get directly notified?
So what we've tried to do, we have a quarterly newsletter, and we've tried to include that kind of updates in there. We also have created an email, and so if your company wants to get updates from an email, then we do have a way to do that. And if you go to is it Jennifer, the technical services? I can't remember what it's on. Preliminary engineering. Is it on the PMU site? Okay, thank you. The key though is you have to put in an email that is like a service email for your company. If you put in your email, we're going to kick it back and you can't have it, because the intent is for us to kind of send it out to a service email to your company, and then that email spreads it to your company. Because we used to have this email address and we were sending stuff out and we'd get 5,000 bounce backs, and so we're trying to cut back on that. But yeah, we do have that now, and so we will use that to update. Bill, hold on, I saw one other question over here. Yeah, you, yes sir, Jason.
So if we're building out a mainly estimate for express design, what would you recommend we do for the estimate? Because I still through this process and didn't see
So they are not really using the kitchen sink, the Workday estimate form. Matt, do y'all have your own form for doing consultant estimates? Okay, so did you hear that? All right. Okay, yeah. Yes, Bill. Yeah, I think that would be fine. Yeah. It's just we're trying not to send it to a direct person. And I know in your case, if you leave the company fold, so that probably doesn't matter, but but that's what we're trying to do. So, all right. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Well, one more in the back, and then I'll let you go, Ray, I promise.
for the PDN scope, it was mentioned the practice of striking through, and so keeping every bit of it and then striking through. Is that a preference for the final product of the scope, or just as you're working through the scope, you do that and at the end you delete, or is there?
So I would say that that's probably a PM preference, but what I'm hearing from most people I've talked to is they like the strikeout because it helps everybody be really clear that it was intended to be taken out, even in the final draft. Because that way you can go back and look later and still know, oh, we did consider that. So I'm not going to say that's the absolute way to do it, but that's what I'm hearing more as a preference. Rake, I'll give you the last question.
I just saw recently that, you have a lot more scope work, especially for the construction cost estimate in there. And I wasn't sure whether that's intended for the PDF forms, or was it just intended for just to know what the scope is?
Oh, you're talking about in the actual scope that comes out of the scope of services generator? So the scope of services generator was created, and all the scopes provided a scope of work, just trying to create some consistency. So those scopes are from each of the units. Does that?
Yeah, but I'm talking about cost estimate, the construction cost estimate that you do it 3-4 times for a project, and every stage that you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But there is the actual scope for that.
So,
I'm not sure why it was created as scope for the.
that's.
Whereas you don't have that in the estimate.
Yeah, I will say that we have created scopes in the scope of services for work that's been traditionally done in-house. And one of the reasons we've done that is because on our in-house projects, we are now requiring a scope and a mandate estimate and, schedule and all that. Because, we're trying to follow the rules that if we're making the consultants do it, we need to be doing it in-house. So you will see some scopes of work now that are typically not stuff that we consult out. And it's because we want to have a scope for doing in-house work. Does that answer your?
Yeah, it answers my question, and the question it just came about because one of the reasons asked us to have that scope in there, and I'm like, I'm not gonna get paid for this, because I didn't understand.
Well, now, I will say that in your scope of work, you could include that and designate that as a DOT task. So, because like I said, on the schedule, we have listed that this is normally a DOT task, and so we've kind of put a tab there for who's responsible. So again, with the scope, you may want to do the same thing. It's DOT, it's just clear they're doing it, not you. So, did y'all have a follow-up? No, go ahead.
So we're doing some non-traditional projects that are raise grants, trail projects, and one of them has a lot of landscaping type, pocket park type design.
Shoot.
So are you anticipating that folks do you have preferred places in the median where you want us to add scope that's non-conforming? Like, do you have do you want us to tack it on at the end, or?
So I would say that you just need to put that in your scope of services.
Somewhere in the scope of service.
Yeah, don't worry about the PDN. I would just put it into the scope of services. Yeah, because there's going to be some things, and Charles alluded to it, that, you may add something to the standard scope for your particular project. So that's where I would add it.
So in the scope of services, would you put it under, you just make a new header?
Yeah, if it doesn't fit in a certain category, you can make a no header. That's fine, because it's just a Word document. So, all right, y'all, it is overtime. I don't know why there's not a slide with the thing, but I will put these up here. This is the there it is. One's the evaluation, and one's the physical. Oh, there we go. All right.
Yep.
Yes, sir.